Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The commitment to fight the climate crisis must be one of the pillars of any political manifesto this election season. As we evaluate those who are hoping to represent us as lawmakers, it's important that we are aware of not just of their pledges, but also their track record when it comes to environmental and climate policies. And given that today is National Environment Day, it's as good a time as any to demand political parties reveal their election and their environmental and climate manifestos. So tonight, I'll ask my guests what they would like to see in terms of climate commitments. First up, we have Wong Siu Lin. She's the co-founder of Makaranga, which is a news site covering issues of environment and sustainability in Malaysia. Siu Lin, thank you for joining me today. So political watchers are saying that this election will most likely be about the cost of living crisis. But what about the climate crisis? Are you expecting strong environmental and climate commitments from political parties in their election, in their campaigns and in their election manifestos?
Well, I think in Cerama's words like flood, banjir, monsoon, musim tengkujuh are going to be mentioned a lot, particularly by candidates who are against the elections being held during this period. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how far beyond this, this throwing of cannonballs to fire at political opponents, this will go. For example, will anyone highlight what is causing the floods? Will they call out, for example, deforestation? Will they call out inadequate drainage? Will they point to poor planning or corruption even, Then the ideal situation would be, I think at least for people who care about the environment and about the climate, to hear these candidates say, if you vote me in, this is what I am going to do about it. Or this is what my party is going to do about it, I will stop any deforestation that is proven to be causing floods, or we will audit all the infrastructure that cannot cope with this large amount of rainfall that is a result of the climate crisis, yeah? Or I will guarantee to you that the slopes around your neighborhood that are above 30 degrees are not developed. I think that would be the dream.
That's a good point, Siulin, making that connection between what we know, is a monsoon season and floods with the impact of the climate crisis and also poor governance. What is your sense of, how much voters are aware of this connection, of this nexus, and how much these issues resonate with voters across the country? I ask because there's this perception that this is an issue, that the climate crisis and how to mitigate the impact of it is only an issue among, if I may, the starry-eyed youth or the wealthy, urbanites. To coin a phrase from British politics, the Guardian reading, tofu eating, wokerati. Do you think that environmental concerns have broad-based appeal?
Well, I think it's very interesting that we have this new tranche of, I think, 1.2 million young voters coming in, I think aged between 18 and 21, right? And they're coming on board for the first time to vote. But, and everyone's interested in what they think because they can make a big difference, this 1.2 million new young voters, yeah? Let me just quote one of the surveys that I just looked up, and it's the UNDP National Youth Climate Change Survey 2020. And amongst the things they found out, and I think this might actually be indicative of other sort of polls that are going around polling young people. 92% of young Malaysians actually think that climate change is a crisis, right? Which means that they want something to be done about it. 62% have good knowledge or understanding about climate change. So you can't pull the wool over their eyes by saying, oh, I'm going to offer this solution or that solution, and it's not good enough, because they actually know what they're talking about and they know what the solutions should be, yeah? And amongst the things that they care about are actually, yes, floods. They also care about air pollution. They also care about water pollution. So I guess, for candidates, they might want to consider how important this group is in their, constituency. But also this other thing that it's an, urbanite, sort of bubble, I won't say the really popular neighborhood, kind of like wrapped in the little bubbles. Just speaking as a journalist and dealing with other sort of writers as well, we've had writers go up to like Perhentian Islands, for example, or to an island in Sabah, right, in Mantanani Island, and they actually are actually grateful when somebody comes in and asks them, what are your problems, and they want to highlight these problems because they need their problems to be solved. And I think any good candidate who cares enough about their constituents, and if they go out and they find out, for example, in Perhentian Island, that pollution, rubbish, waste management is a huge problem, and they want to do something about it, I'm pretty sure they're going to get the votes of these people. Likewise with, say, indigenous villages, right? Whether in Pinampang or in Gua Musang, go speak to the indigenous people, and you will find that these issues are dealing with climate crisis and dealing with environmental degradation are very, very big issues for them.
So you just cited one of the series as part of the Makaranga Tanah Air special series, of which you are the editor. It looks at governance in Malaysia and how it's impacting humans and nature. So you looked at, one of the series was looking at pollution and waste management in islands, for instance. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose those topics? I guess I'm wondering, which issues, in your estimation, was the best gateway to a bigger discourse about other environmental issues in Malaysia?
Yeah, so when we wanted to do this series, we basically wanted to cover the biggest environmental issues in Malaysia. And then we sort of realized that every issue is big, every issue needs attention immediately, every issue is urgent. And so what we did was to dig deep, but we also spoke to experts, policymakers, NGOs, scientists, and tried to sort of group these concerns that everybody had into what ended up being these three big issues, which was climate, ecosystems, and pollution. And basically, we use the term tanah air because it comprises of the words literally tanah and air, which is land and water. But collectively, I mean, tanah air means homeland. And so we wanted people to sort of reset their thinking and go back to what tanah means, what IA means, what our relationship is to land and water, and ultimately homeland, whether we are individuals, whether we are a community, whether we are citizens, a nation, through the actual, through the imaginative, the individual, the personal, and the collective.
There was a sense of, a patriotic sense kind of reading this, because you want to kind of take care of the land and water in every sense. I do want to ask you, though, I mean, part of that was really to highlight some of the current issues. Where do you see, what did you find through that process? What were some of the solutions that you had hoped would come out from having put out this special series?
Yeah, well, I think we wanted to see if there were commonalities, right? So we looked at drivers. What are the drivers of each of these issues? What's the driver of, what are the drivers behind climate change? And we looked at food security, because that's the big thing right now. Prices are going up, food prices are going up, and will undoubtedly, unfortunately, continue to go up. So we wanted to look at the drivers of that. We wanted to look at the impacts of that sort of thing. And then we wanted to look at solutions as well. We don't want it just to be a negative sort of, all doom and gloom kind of approach to the whole thing. Likewise with ecosystems, we looked specifically at reclamations, because that's again one of the big kind of land use changes that's happening in Malaysia. And the final thing was, as you had mentioned, and I did earlier, was pollution and waste management. And I think what one of the ideas was to look at governance, to look at governance in every sense of the word, whether by the people in government, but also by the people at a very local level, at community level. And if you, for example, are running, a little resort somewhere, or you have a little paddy field somewhere, like, how do you feel about it? How is this impacting you? How would you like to, be governed, if you like. How would you like issues like climate change, which is so big? What are you asking? So we went to the ground and we spoke to farmers, we spoke to paddy farmers, we spoke to fishers, by the coast, and as well as tour operators, tourism being a very key economic sector in Malaysia.
So on that note of governance, for the people governing at the highest echelons of power, Siu-Lin, how vulnerable are climate policies to the vagaries of the whims of these people, to the vagaries of political uncertainty? Is political uncertainty detrimental to the country's efforts to address the climate crisis?
Undoubtedly. Again, it's like any other issue, whether it's about education or, again, back to food security, because that's such a big thing, or management of cities. A stable government is absolutely critical to have the country function on any level at all. So let's look at the hot topic of food security, right? So one of the stories that we covered was about rice. It's something that every Malaysian eats, whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in a city or on an island, it's something that's our staple food. So we wanted to look at that, and there is scientific data to show that the temperatures have actually risen in 4 of the largest granaries in Malaysia, and these supply about 60% of Malaysia's rice, right? Now, government data itself shows that flooding and dry spells in the near future, in 2030 and 2050, will actually lower rice yields in 3 of those major granaries. So this is something to be concerned about. And so what is government or what are policymakers doing about it? So, for example, we spoke to the Malaysian Agricultural Research and Development Institute, which is MARDI, and they are, for one, working at developing climate-resilient paddy varieties. They are looking at improving water management in rice production. And something else that needs attention is when there's severe storms, infrastructure that brings, for example, water down to the paddy fields needs to be addressed. Yeah. So definitely that's one of the aspects that I think needs to be looked at. Now, in terms of laws, and we are still drafting the Climate Change Act. Yeah, but we have a lot of policies on climate. We have the National Policy on Climate Change, which was devised in 2009. We have the Low Carbon Mobility Blueprint, the National Low Carbon Cities Master Plan, which is very recent, 2021, right? But then federal policies need buy-in at state level as well, right? And they need buy-in from local councils, the people who are actually going to be hands-on implementing these things that actually work or don't work for the average citizens. Yeah. So in terms of a stable government, I guess, we need a functioning country so that laws can be drafted. So let me give you 2 examples, right? So we have 2 acts related to the environment in Peninsular Malaysia. We have the Wildlife Conservation Act, and then we have the National Forestry Act. One was 11 years old, and the other one was 29 years old since the last amendments, right? So they need to be amended and brought up to date because the fines and the jail sentences for poaching, for illegal logging were way too low, being one of the reasons why they have to be updated, right? So in 2019, the cabinet then approved the amendments, and they were supposed to be tabled. Then we had a new cabinet, we had a change of government in 2020, and then another new cabinet the year after. Every time we have a new cabinet, new approvals are needed, So finally, the Wildlife Act was passed in 2021. And then the National Forestry Act was also amended just recently in July, right? So we do need, these laws to be put into place so that enforcement officers can do their job, so that we can tackle, these huge crises that are affecting us in terms of the environment.
Well, having said all that, then, Siu-Lin, what are you going to be watching in terms of climate and environmental commitments throughout this GE election campaigning period?
Well, I think definitely, there's lots of groups that are actually have been trying to lobby government and have been trying to put, the word across. And I'm just going to name 2. One of them is the Gabungan Darurat Iklim, which is a climate emergency coalition of Malaysia. There are a loose coalition of 20 to 30 organizations, I think, including Klima Action Malaysia, Greenpeace, and PAKOS in Sabah. They've been calling for a climate emergency to be declared. This is so that it's taken, whatever the climate crisis taken seriously and resources are put through, and likewise the CSO platform for reform, and they comprise about 100 over organizations, civil society, right? And they are also asking for climate emergency to be declared. Personally, I think as a journalist, I would just like data to be available so that we can do our jobs. I think COVID, unfortunately, brought up this thing about a whole of society approach, and journalists are very much part of it. So I would love for data to be transparent, to be available, so that everybody can chip in and help. And finally, I think funding, fund agencies, fund the people who are the frontliners, the Wildlife Department, the Forestry Department, the Department of Environment, doing so many different things to do with pollution and the environment. Even JKR, slope management, all these different agencies are grossly underfunded, and it would be wonderful to see more funding flow to them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for speaking to me. That was Wong Siu-Lin from the environmental news site Macaranga. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.
Membawakan perkembangan terkini pilihan raya umum Malaysia ke-15.
Kupasan dan analisis isu semasa bersama pakar tempatan.
Menampilkan tetamu jemputan dalam industri.
Angkat aspirasi rakyat, suara anda kami dengar.
Perbincangan kami bawakan
hingga malam penentuan siapakah yang bakal dipilih Tabir Negara.
Bersama kami dalam Malaysia Decides, hanya di TBS.
This is the digitalization race. And the Maxis Right expertise team is going on full speed. Powered by a scalable enterprise-grade fixed network. Utilizing the right network, solutions, and insights. Also, businesses can focus on staying ahead of the race. What a win in digital resilience.
It takes the right team with the right capabilities to future-proof your business.
Duo berkeju ORKFC. Bukankah resepi original tu ayam? Dah jadi burger keju melimpah. Yang pasti sedap hingga baju pun nak makan sekali. Sebab itulah sedap hingga menjilat jari.
Ini masanya untuk Asia bangkit. Kami bawakan diskusi mengenai pasca pandemik, pemulihan ekonomi, teknologi tinggi, perubahan iklim dan banyak lagi. Saksikan agenda AWANI Asia bersama pakar dan koresponden Asia kami setiap Sabtu 9 malam di Astro AWANI.
Alami kehebatan dunia Unified TV dengan lebih 70 saluran premium dan 16 aplikasi penstreaman. Tonton dan nikmati rancangan kanak-kanak, liputan sukan, drama Korea dan filem terkini. Bila-bila masa di mana jua. Dapatkan Unify hari ini.
Unify. Inspirasi alam semula jadi menjadi pilihan agar idea saya sentiasa segar. Ditemani teh hijau boh, kini saya terinspirasi. Teh hijau boh, ada boh, ada
Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. Let's continue our look at why it's important to know the environmental policies of each political party and also to be aware of their track record of governance. As you know, this is, of course, election season, and we're going to evaluate those who are hoping to represent us as lawmakers. My next guest is Effendi Yang Amri. He is a coral reef ecologist with the Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences at University Malaya. Effendi, thank you for joining me today. Let's start our conversation tonight with a look at how political governance impacts the environment. For instance, when state governments embark on mega projects like land reclamation projects, often those projects are politically linked. So can you share some of your observations about how, reclamation projects in general can damage coastal and marine ecosystems?
Yeah, thank you for having me on this program. So what we have done in some of the areas, especially in Malacca, is that we looked at some of the islands and reefs that are there. Yes, there are reefs in Malacca, and we found that the reefs are still viable, and there are some species that are very rare in those areas. Now, when reclamation happens on the coastal areas nearby these reefs, this reclamation activities, what it does is it will carry a lot of sand and also a lot of sediments into the system. It creates perturbations, and these sediments or sand can actually impact the corals, whereby it will submerge, or it will cover the corals, and the corals will be stressed and they can't photosynthesize very well, and they could die. Now, for any coastal reclamations that needs to be done, especially near these viable reef areas, there should be a very good environmental impact assessment done and mitigation plans to be in any of the before the project starts. So this is what we hope, that if any coastal reclamation is done, they need to talk to marine ecologists. They need to be talking to the locals, to be asking about what's there. And locals, like in Malacca, they would know where these reefs are. And that's why I was very happy to be involved in the report by Makaranga on the reclamation projects in Malacca a few weeks ago. And this awareness is part of the big picture that we can mitigate any problems if there is any reclamation.
So it was really wonderful, part of that Tanah Air Makaranga's special series, talking about, land reclamation, the impact to marine ecosystems. You in 2019, along with your team, had discovered 5 coral species classified as vulnerable of the islands of Malacca, and that discovery was so important that the Department of Fisheries had gazetted that area as protected marine parks. Now, I do wonder, because the Malacca state government had given assurances that any kind of reclamation projects would, have minimal environmental damage. But in your estimation, Effendi, do officials who make these decisions, do they understand the interconnectedness and the fragility of marine ecosystems? You said that you're hoping, decision makers will talk to marine ecologists, but was that the case in the Malacca Reclamation Project?
They will be talking to consultants for sure, but the main thing was that we did not know how much they surveyed the areas before plans of coastal development was done. And when we reported the area had good viable coral reefs and there were vulnerable and rare corals in the area, it seemed to be the first report of this. So that triggered some alarm bells, and we hope that any reclamation projects that needs to be done, the first step would be to engage marine ecologists and the locals to find out what's there first before plans are being made.
Effendi, I do have to ask, is it possible for a large-scale reclamation project to be environmentally sound or environmentally sustainable? Can it happen, or is it just a trade-off that decision makers have to make over development and jobs and investment over the environment and the ecology?
Well, I would say if it's too big, the adverse effects to the ecosystems will be quite bad. So that's where the discussion must be done with the marine experts to find out where are the good areas, where are the vulnerable areas, and developers should take this into consideration when they are doing their plans. I would say that if the discussion is made earlier at the start, the chances of getting the magical balance is much better. Yeah.
Right. One of the things that really struck me about the Tanah Air piece in Macaranga was at the end of the piece, there were questions posed to readers to think about what, the reader would do if they were in charge of state development and had to, proceed with this land reclamation project. I'm going to ask you, who's someone who is an expert in this field, what you would have answered to that question if you were in charge of state development and this reclamation project. How would you balance the competing interests of investment in jobs and protecting the environment? What are the actions you would like to see your state leaders take?
Well, one of the main things that needs to be done is actually we need to know what's there in the area. In Malaysia, there's not a lot of maps to show where the coral reefs are, the seagrasses are. Mangroves we are fine because we can use satellite remote sensing. But areas of importance like coral reefs and seagrass, we have not mapped a lot of these areas yet. So if I'm in charge, I would want people to map these areas first, so that when coastal development program is needed or is suggested, then we can say, okay, these are the areas you can and these are the areas you can't. So basically, the first thing is to engage marine scientists and to look at and map all these important ecosystems first. Then only we can make a very good informed decision. The second thing is, if I need to do it, I would want a very detailed environmental impact assessment to be done by a very good consultant.
All right. Well, okay. So as an ecologist, as a scientist, and as a voter yourself, Effendi, what will you be watching for in GE15 with regards to environmental commitments from the candidates and the political parties?
I'll be looking at two things actually. For any political party, they need to put in their manifestos, and that one, So there's two things. One is, because I'm a marine ecologist, I would love to see in their manifesto to say that they will discuss and implement a national ocean policy, which has been suggested since 2011, but it's not been passed in the parliament. The second thing is that I want to see in any of the political parties' manifesto is to look at the 30 by 30 plan, which is basically to protect 30% of the land and marine environment by 2030. So what are their plans for that? These two things are very important so that we protect our environment and also the diversity in Malaysia, because Malaysia is one of the hottest diversity areas in the world. We are part of the Coral Triangle, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Effendi, thank you so much for speaking with me. That was coral reef ecologist Effendi Yang Amri from the Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences at University Malaya. And that wraps up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.